The letter came 3 days after she stopped expecting anything at all. Margaret didn't open it right away. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the shelter, turning the envelope over slowly in her hands, tracing the faded ink of her name like it might disappear if she looked at it too directly. Margaret Hale. She hadn't seen her name written like that in a long time. Not properly. Not intentionally. Most places didn't bother anymore. Forms. Lists. Temporary tags. But this had been written. Addressed. Sent. To her. Probably a mistake, she muttered. Because that made more sense. At 74, you don't expect new things to arrive. You expect things to end. Quietly. Gradually. One piece at a time. The shelter room around her was still. For beds. Free occupied. No one spoke unless they had to. The air carried the low hum of people waiting. For something they couldn't quite name anymore. Margaret turned the envelope over again. No return address. Just her name. And a postmark from a town she didn't recognize. She let out a small breath. Then opened it. Inside. A single folded sheet. Nothing else. No explanation. No introduction. Just words. She read them once. Then again. Then a third time, slower. Because the first two hadn't made sense. Margaret Hale, if this reaches you, the property is still unclaimed. The farm is yours if you want it. No debts remain. No one else is coming. Coordinates are included. That was it. No signature. No context. Just an offer. Margaret stared at the paper. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edges. A farm, she whispered. The word felt unfamiliar. Not because she didn't know what it meant. Because it didn't belong to her life anymore. Not for a long time. She folded the letter carefully. Then unfolded it again. The coordinates sat at the bottom. Precise. Clear. Real. This doesn't make sense, she said. No one responded. No one cared. That's how it worked now. She looked down at her hands. Thin. Veined. Worn from years of work that had long since stopped meaning anything. She had nothing left. That wasn't dramatic. It was just true. No home. No savings. No place to go. Just time. And even that felt uncertain. Margaret folded the letter again. Slower this time. More deliberate. Because something about it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt final. Like something waiting. She stood up. Her knees protested slightly. The familiar ache settling in as she moved. Ignored it. Packed what little she had. A small bag. A few clothes. Nothing else. Because there was nothing else. By the afternoon, she left. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. That's how it worked. People came. People left. No one followed. The bus ride took hours. Long enough for doubt to settle in. Long enough for the letter to feel less real the further she got from it. But she didn't turn back. Because there wasn't anything to return to. The town at the end of the route was small. Quiet. The kind of place where things stayed the same because nothing new ever arrived. Margaret stepped off the bus slowly, adjusting her coat against the wind. The air smelled different. Cleaner. Colder. She took out the letter. Checked the coordinates again. Then started walking. The road stretched further than she expected. Turning from pavement to gravel. From gravel to dirt. The landscape opened up around her, fields stretching out on either side. Empty, unworked, quiet. Her steps slowed. Not from uncertainty. From awareness. Because places like this held history, even when no one talked about it. The farm came into view slowly. At first, just a shape on the horizon. Then, details. A house. A barn. Fencing that leaned but didn't collapse. It wasn't new. It wasn't maintained. But it wasn't gone either. Margaret stopped at the edge of the property. Just stood there. Looking. Because this was real. Not a letter. Not a mistake. A place. She stepped forward. The ground beneath her feet felt different. Solid. Unmoving. Like it remembered something. The house stood closest. Wooden. Faded. But intact. The windows weren't broken. Just dusty. The door. Closed. Margaret approached slowly. Reached out. Her hand rested on the handle for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned it. The door opened. Inside. Stillness. Not decay. Not ruin. Just absence. Furniture remained. Covered lightly in dust. A table. Chairs. A stove in the corner. Nothing overturned. Nothing destroyed. Just left. Margaret stepped in. The floor creaked beneath her weight. But held. That was the first thing she noticed. It still held. She walked further inside. One room at a time. Not everything. Just the next step. That was enough. The kitchen. Usable. The back room. Small and closed. Better for warmth. The windows. Intact. The roof. Stable. She stopped in the center of the room. Looked around. Not at what it was. At what it could still do. All right, she said quietly. Because that was the only answer she had. She didn't question the letter again. Didn't look for proof. Because the place itself was the proof. That night, she stayed. The house was cold, but it blocked the wind. The walls held the space. She found blankets. Old, but usable. Lit a small fire in the stove after checking it carefully. It worked. The warmth came slowly. But it came. Margaret sat near it, her hands resting in her lap, the light flickering softly against the walls. The silence here was different. Not empty, not crowded, just present. Morning came without noise. No traffic, no voices, just light filtering through the windows. Margaret stood slowly, her body stiff, but responsive. She looked around again. Not everything, just the next thing. The door, she said. It needed reinforcement. The frame was slightly loose. She found tools in the barn. Old, but usable. Fixed it. Not perfectly, but enough. Then the fence. One section leaned too far. She straightened it. Used wires she found in a rusted box. It held. That was enough. Days passed. Simple. Focused. One task at a time. She didn't try to fix everything. Didn't try to restore the whole farm. Just what mattered. The water pump. It worked after some effort. The soil. Dry it first. But not dead. She cleared a small patch. Tested it. It responded. Slowly. But it responded. That mattered. By the second week, the place felt different. Not abandoned. Used. Not new. But alive. Margaret moved through it differently now. Not as someone passing through. As someone who belonged. And then, she found it. In the barn. Behind a stack of old crates. A door. Small. Set into the floor. Wooden. With a metal ring handle. Margaret stopped. Her hand resting lightly on the ring. Because something about it felt like the letter. Unexplained. Waiting. She pulled. The door lifted. Slow. Heavy. And beneath it wasn't what she expected. Margaret stared down into the darkness. Because whatever was hidden on that farm was about to change everything. Margaret didn't step down right away. She stood there at the edge of the opening, one hand still resting on the metal ring, her eyes adjusting to the darkness below. It wasn't deep. Not a cellar meant for storage over generations. Something smaller. More deliberate. A space that had been made for a purpose, not just convenience. She found a lantern hanging from a nail along the barn wall. Old. Dust-covered. But when she tested it, it worked. The flame came alive slowly, steady and controlled. Margaret held it out in front of her and stepped down. One step, then another. The air below was cooler. Still, but not damp. That was the first thing she noticed. No rot. No mold. Just preserved. The space was narrow, barely large enough for two people to stand side by side. Wooden supports held the ceiling, reinforced carefully, not hastily, not temporarily. Intentional. Margaret moved forward slowly, the lantern light revealing more of the room. Shelving. Boxes. Neatly stacked. Covered, but not abandoned. She set the lantern on a small ledge and reached for the closest box. Opened it. Inside. Jars. Sealed. Preserved food. Vegetables. Fruits. Even meat. Her breath slowed. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't forgotten. This was prepared. She moved to the next box. Opened it. Tools. Not rusted. Maintained. Wrapped carefully. Then another. Seeds. Packets. Organized by type. Labeled. Margaret's fingers paused over one of them. The handwriting was familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Not because she recognized it. Because it felt intentional. Like someone had expected this to be found. She straightened slowly, her eyes scanning the room again. This wasn't left behind, she said quietly. It was left for someone. The realization settled deeper than she expected. Because that meant the letter wasn't random. The farm wasn't abandoned by accident. Someone had set this up. For her. Or for whoever would come. Margaret exhaled slowly, then nodded once. Because questions could wait. What mattered now was what she had. She carried one of the boxes up. Then another. Didn't rush. Didn't take everything. Just enough. The kind of enough that made a difference. Back inside the house, she set the jars on the table carefully. Opened one. Tested it. Still good. Still usable. A small breath left her. Not relief. Recognition. Because this was stability. Food that didn't depend on luck. Tools that didn't require money. Seeds that meant growth. Whoever had left this had understood survival. Not short-term. Not temporary. Sustained. Margaret sat down at the table, looked at everything in front of her, then back toward the barn. You planned this, she said quietly. No answer. But the silence didn't feel empty. It felt acknowledged. From that day on, was no longer just staying there. She belonged to it. Then, one afternoon, a car pulled in. Clean. Out of place. A man stepped out. Older. Well-dressed. He looked at the farm, then at her. You're Margaret Hale, he said. Not a question. A statement. She nodded slowly. Yes. He stepped closer. I wasn't sure the letter would reach you, he said. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. You sent it. He nodded. I did. Silence settled between them. Not tense. Measured. Margaret crossed her arms lightly. Why? She asked. The man looked around the farm. The land. The structure. Everything she had brought back. Because this place needed someone who wouldn't waste it, he said. She didn't respond. Just waited. I used to work it, he continued. Years ago. When it still mattered. A pause. I left, he added. Thought someone else would take it over. Margaret glanced toward the barn. They didn't. No, he said quietly. They didn't. Another pause. Then. So you set it up, she said. The cellar. The supplies. He nodded. I prepared it, he said. In case someone came who needed it. Margaret held his gaze. And you chose me. Another nod. I tracked where the property records ended up, he said. Saw your name. Saw where you were. A small breath. You had nothing left, he added. Which meant you wouldn't take this for granted. The words didn't offend her. They didn't comfort her either. They just fit. Margaret looked around again. The farm. The work. Everything that held now. Then back at him. You didn't give me anything, she said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. No. You left something behind, she corrected. I built the rest. A small smile touched his face. That's true. Silence settled again. Then, what happens now? She asked. He glanced at the land. Then back at her. That's up to you, he said. Another pause. I'm not here to take it, he added. Or control it. Margaret studied him for a moment longer, then nodded once. Good, she said. Because anything else wouldn't have worked. The man smiled slightly, then stepped back. You've done more with it than I expected, he said. Margaret didn't answer. She didn't need to. He turned, walked back to his car, and left. The road swallowed the sound quickly. The quiet returned. But it wasn't the same quiet. Margaret stood there for a moment longer, then turned back toward the house. The farm stretched out around her. Stronger, steadier, and no longer something forgotten. She walked slowly, not rushing, not stopping, just moving. Because now, there was no question left. No uncertainty. No waiting for something to be taken away. The letter had brought her there, but it hadn't saved her. She had done that herself. And whatever came next would be built the same way, one step at a time, just the next thing. And that was enough.